Great pleasure to invite one of Australia's most prominent and successful entrepreneurs to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Baxter.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for a wonderful couple of days so far. I've got no idea what I'm doing up here after listening to Nigel Farage this morning. I'm shit scared after that performance. I'm here to talk about how governments stuff up markets. I'm a die-hard libertarian, and I'm also a telco guy. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, because I think it's important to understand my background, because in this debate, especially the NBN debate, it's been taken over by the equivalent of network anti-vaxxers. The idiots are actually controlling the debate. I'm an ex-soldier. I actually joined the army, the regular army, here when I was 15 years old. Thank God that's illegal now. Spent 9 years carrying a rifle for this country, and I'd do it again. My first business was a dial-up ISP in Adelaide, and my second business was a facilities-based telecommunications carrier. We built land-based fibre optic cable, we built subsea cable, we built submarine cable from Sydney to Guam, and I worked for Google for a year in the US, building multi-terabit fibre systems between their big secret data centres. I've actually done this shit before. I'm one of the clueful ones. I'm now an investor. I've got over 30 startup investments in the tech space. And the reason I'm so passionate about NBN is there's a real issue we have in Australia and the world at the moment. 10 years ago, or probably 12 years ago, and prior to that, we had an advantage here. The advantage was, sadly, that it cost about $200,000 to $500,000 to start a decent sizable tech business. But we could find that money in Australia. It cost the same to start that business here as it did in South America or in Israel or anywhere else. Nowadays, it costs $20,000 to start a tech business. And all you need is a couple of laptops and a decent internet connection, and about 20 grand and you're off. Now, not only can we do that, but also can the very well-educated person in the favela in Brazil, or the person in Bulgaria or anywhere else. We've screwed ourselves on competitive advantage by really stuffing up telecommunications. This talk's morphed out of a wider talk I do in the libertarian circles about the pulse of regulation in competitive markets. Because when it comes to NBN as well, we had lots more other problems we should have solved first. But we have lots of other problems in the community in general. I mean, what was the actual problem we were trying to solve? If the answer is a new monopoly, what the bloody hell was the problem? We have big issues out there, such as in the area of regulation and over-regulation. People with organisations such as the CFMMEU, what happened, the disgraceful behaviour with the Carmichael mine in Queensland, over-certification in general, and bureaucrats being given way too many powers through regulation without any oversight from politicians. So we've got lots of issues, but I'm going to concentrate on NBN. And as a quick potted background, competitive telecoms in Australia started in about 1997. With the deregulation of telecommunications. Probably one of the best pieces of legislation in the telco space in the world at the time. It's since been added to, and it's now a horrible mishmash, and it's almost impossible to read. A lot of stuff happened pre-97 with respect to rollouts. Optus came into the market; they were competing HFC rollouts. It was pretty messy. Post-97 and for a couple of years after that, the required regulations got sorted out by ASIC actually and the ACCC. The competitive carrier era started, and that was around 99, 2000. That was fantastic. And I'm biased here. I've made a lot of money out of this industry, so I'm particularly biased. I'll stick that out there. But that was in 1997. Talk of a new NBN started in sort of 2006, 2007. So we didn't even wait a decade before we decided we needed a new monopoly. I've coined this regulatory battered spouse syndrome, where you get beat up by the monopolist. You move away, you move out, you separate, you split, you get sad, you go back and you get slapped in the face again. And this is what we've done to ourselves. Along the way, we took certain pieces of poison along the way with respect to our competitive stance. Telstra's shareholders saw fit to install a team of very aggressive Americans in charge of Telstra back in 2005 with Sol Trujillo and his Merry Americans. And that set up a whole chain of events that led to the current status we have with NBN. But what was the actual problem we were solving? There was perceptions of speed and ubiquity of access. Everyone can get it. But I would say this, if you can't get a first-grade MRI machine in Normanton, North Queensland, Why is it you should get a really fast interconnect connection? You can make a choice of where you live. And it's not the government's responsibility to provide you with a really, really fast internet connection, regardless of that decision. And most of the problems that are out there are actually latent effects to monopoly. People malign to Telstra's copper network. Copper's good, it's got its problems, it's got its physical limitations, but in essence it's good. There's nothing wrong with it. The only one thing wrong with it, it was owned by a monopolist. And over the years, what actually happened, in essence, was they made a very rational decision, monopolists. They said it's going to cost us $1 billion a year, for example, to maintain our copper network. If we only spend $800 million, what's going to happen? We'll piss off 5% of our customers. Right, where are they going to go? Nowhere. Great, we won't spend the money. We've re-implemented that exact same infrastructure. We now have a new monopolist who doesn't give a shit about you. Who's had a positive NBN installation experience? Oh, well, one, that's not bad actually. I was expecting none. And why are they doing that? Do you think if they were threatened with competition, that would be a shit experience? No, it would be a good experience. Competition is the problem. The solution started out at a $4 billion fibre to the node network back in the mid-2000s, in the first around 2005, 2006, with a few competitive tenders. Then the government basically said, gee whiz, this sounds easy, let's do it. And the literal $40 billion fibre to the home network. Now, I gave you my introduction to the start because I've built this stuff. I've actually literally dug holes, dragged fibre myself. I've spent my own capital. I've convinced shareholders to invest their capital. I've gone out and sold it. I've hired staff. I've fired staff. I've sold those companies. I know how to do this in my core. No one was it going to happen less than $70 billion. The numbers that were put out there were absolute fantasy. So that's it. When you think about the NBN argument and about what happened when Malcolm Turnbull came in and changed it to the fibre to the home, the fibre to the node mix, the multi-tech mix, you have to know that. If they say that it was only going to cost that original amount, it's wrong, it's bullshit. It's like the submarines only costing $50 billion. It's not going to happen. It was predicated by a politician I hate but have so much respect for, because probably a few politicians here, most set out to have this amazingly positive social experience with you. They will tell you whatever you want to get a smile and make you leaving happy. Stephen Conroy didn't. I think the man's a mental midget. But by Christ, he never lied to your face. You got both barrels. I've got so much respect for him out of that. And I really enjoyed watching him on the 18th of May that night on Sky TV. That was fantastic. I also, he did say a lot more than his mate Richard Marles sitting right next to him. Richard Marles lost a litre of blood on the spot. So, what has been the... How much time have I got, Andrew? Is that 17 minutes, is it? All right, cool. So it started out at $4 billion. It soon went to $43 billion. Industry clueful types put it at somewhere about 70. I think the Liberal hawks said could be 95. I think 95 would have been the upper range. Would have been hard to get it to $95 billion. Well, you could do it. Would have been hard to sensibly get it to $95 billion. Would have been a lot of headaches in that one. And the multi-tech mix change, Malcolm Turnbull came down and put it to $49. The problem with NBN is actually it costs too much. The reason it actually goes slow for speed is it costs too much, which might sound really weird. But here's one interesting fact, that if you build and own a fibre optic network, if one person uses it, it costs you the same to operate as if 1 million people use it. There's no additional cost to operate this. So when you know that, you have to start wondering why they propose this, why they propose speed tiers, why there's download limits. The whole thing will cost around about $4 billion a year to operate. Easy maths in Australia, there's 10 million billing endpoints in the telecoms world. We have to recover $400 a household per year to pay for this. That's $35 a month a household. And you can have unlimited 1,000 megabit per second connections to your house, or whatever your technology will support. Why are we doing it this way? It's because monopolists got involved. All these old guys that Telstra and Optus had fired all of a sudden turned up in NBN. There's lots of consequences to what's actually occurred with respect to NBN. And if there's any technical stuff in here, I'm actually not going to apologise, because we've actually reached this point because non-technical people who are very good at installing Wi-Fi at home got an opinion. And that's where we are. That's why where we are. There's a bunch of consequences in this. The loss of profit in the industry has been staggering. And in fact, in NBN's corporate report, annual report, they actually list the requirement in order for them to make their revenue targets as rising ARPU, or rising revenue from customers, from $46 a month in 2018 to 2040, $104 a month. Now that's probably price ranges in line with probably double what happens in the rest of the world. So we spend $49 billion to pay more for slower speeds, with the regulated price increases regardless of competition. It's just pure nuts. Telstra had a restriction on their mobile network. So Telstra, as a part of the NBN negotiations in order to access and to participate in this game, were basically threatened on their mobile network that they wouldn't get access to future spectrum allocations for their mobile network. That's how the government brought Telstra to bear, essentially. As one of the conditions of the sale of their copper network, they also couldn't actually advertise their mobile network as a replacement for broadband, although as we all know, it probably goes a damn sight better than NBN at times, and it's actually cheaper to use in most cases at the moment. That won't stay the same forever. The funny thing is that mobile network in Australia, despite all that, is mostly unregulated. I'd probably say it's 99% unregulated. So in Australia, back in 2009 when NBN sort of got its major legs up, we were number 25 in the world for internet speeds. We're now number 65 in the world for internet speeds, fixed line internet speeds. In mobile, we're a solid number 3. Number 3 in the world for mobile speeds, and there's a bunch of other metrics out there you use to judge a mobile network that makes us even far better than that, potentially number 1 in the world. That's in a deregulated space. So if the young chap I had breakfast with this morning who wanted a monopoly back, we had an interesting conversation. When you don't have a monopoly, that's what can happen. You can get far better outcomes. We actually have restrictions on building telecommunications infrastructure. We all talk about infrastructure. The NBN monopoly parts of the law basically prevent or make it very hard to build competitive infrastructure unless it's on the same horrendous terms that NBN operate at. So we're actually preventing people from building infrastructure. It's absolutely crazy. There's been scope creep on what NBN does. So back when it was first proposed, it had a very limited impact into corporate Australia. There's an amazingly vibrant, competitive wholesale fibre telecommunications market in Australia. It's what my business used to be. We used to connect up buildings. We used to dig a hole between 2 buildings, put some cable in the ground, tie it off at either end, hand it to customers and hand them a bill for $2,000 a month. It was great business. You get a second customer between those 2 buildings and it was like 99% gross margin. Even drug dealers didn't make that much money. Don't anyone repeat that one, please. And actually, I have to pay full credit. That's actually a quote from my business partner, Bevan, so it's not mine, but I love using it. But NBN has crept in there. They're signing deals with Woolworths and Australia Post. They're literally getting into places they were never meant to get into using exceptionally cheap government-funded capital. So we're totally acting against the private sector. There's a latent issue we're seeing played out now in the Pacific. So the NBN satellite solution essentially made some of the orbital slots and some of the business cases for commercial spacecraft operators over Australia borderline. As a result, they didn't launch spacecraft to service Australia for satellite for data. That might sound boring, but most of these satellites had overspilled into the Pacific Island nations, and as a result, they could also pick up these Pacific Island nations and give them services. NBN took that, no competitive satellites up there. The Pacific Island nations are now going to China asking to build submarine cables, of which we're stepping in and saying, no, let us do that. Obviously, we better do that as a part of foreign aid. So it's a really curious sort of overspill. New infrastructure builds also hobbled. So the one way you could get around NBN and actually do something decent was what they call wireless ISPs. Typically point-to-point microwave-based ISPs. There's a fantastic one in Gladstone. I know this chap's got about 800 customers, does a fantastic job. Every regional area has an amazing wireless ISP that they're probably very proud of. They have to beg for spectrum from the government. The same government that owns NBN, the same government that knows the more of the spectrum it lets out, the more competitive stress NBN will be put under. So they are fundamentally conflicted in how they even allocate spectrum to competitors. When the government finally realises the problem actually is they've spent too much money and they actually have to write some capital off in order to make this thing work. So I'll go back to the original point I made before. The real problem with NBN is the fact that it costs so much. In order to keep it off the budget, they have to actually charge a high usage cost. That high usage cost translates into what they call a CVC, or a usage charge on the NBN customers. And you're not NBN customers, ISPs are NBN customers, you're customers of the ISPs. As a result, in order for those businesses to control their cost, they introduce congestion. They only buy exactly what they need and it's never enough. So the reality is they might have 100 customers at one point of interconnection, and they may only buy, for example, 100 megabits a second to service 100 customers, because it's really expensive stuff. It's between $11 and $14 a unit a month. To give you some idea, to get that same unit from LA to Sydney is 70 cents. I'll put it in perspective for you. At some point, so all these wireless ISPs have gone out there and they've built this network. At some point, the government will write that money off. They'll no longer have the requirement to return that, to have that return. Therefore, the price of that usage will come down and the speeds will go up, which is what we should do, right? That's how it works. And all that infrastructure built with private capital will be stranded. We'll have to compete with this aggressive competitor with a really, really cheap cost of capital and a ubiquitous platform. So we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot again. So that second shoe hasn't yet dropped, unfortunately. The budget implications of this are actually quite stark, as was pointed out in a fantastic industry magazine called Comms Day recently. The reality is that the NBN borrowings repay to the government probably around about $400 to $500 million a year. They go straight into that $7 billion surplus they're forecasting. So for them to move on the debt or the equity actually means they're going to put a serious budget hole in their future plans. So that they're not only technically screwed, so that they actually can't let competitors in because it'll destroy their monopoly position. They also fiscally can't touch that because they're actually betting the country's future on it. So it's another reason just to hate what is really a steaming pile of shite. My big plea here and how we fix this is we've got to stop listening to Muppets. The Muppets in this case were a bunch of Melbourne academics and others, everyone who wanted fibre, everyone who wanted the government to dig up their driveway. It was something that was going to cost $4,000 to $6,000 to do for every household in Australia. They wanted the government to come in and do it for $100 a month. The root cause of this is the fact that we were lazy and we asked for it. So we've got to stop doing that. If the answer is another monopoly, for God's sake, stop and think. There were way too many consultants involved. And once again, way too many monopolists got to relive their dreams. When NBN started hiring, Telstra and Optus went on an efficiency drive and got rid of all their Deadwood managers. Seriously. They marched straight back into NBN. I have a friend in, I'm not going to name where he is, I like him, but I don't want to see him lose this, but I have a friend somewhere in Australia who now works for NBN. He's been there for 7 years. His work car was he was there right at the start. They gave him a hire car because they hadn't had a car yet. They're still hiring that same car. You can picture what that's costing, right? So they just don't care about our money. It's not their money, it's our money. They don't give a shit how they spend it. Not enough entrepreneurs had their say on this network. And it's a real shame. Once again, I said we're going to pity those days because right now everyone else in the world is moving against us. Everyone else in the world has access to a better, faster network, cheaper, most likely as well. They're just as smart as us. They've got the same ideas and the same aspirations. What we're playing for is massive. If any of you can just pull out your phone, I love this exercise, I do it all the time, I pull my phone out and I add up the market capitalisation of the companies that own the icons on the front screen of that phone. And it's about $4.6 trillion. None of them based in Australia. But that's okay, because I can also go out, and I did this about a month ago, added up the market capitalisation of the ASX. It's okay, because that's $1.9 trillion. So that's what we're playing for here. Every last piece of productivity in the world is flowing onto one of these things, be it this big or that big, or whatever it might be. The future is digital software is eating the world. And we have to fix this raging dumpster fire that's NBN. Now, I've finished about 7 minutes short, so do I do questions or just surrender time, mate? What do I do? Yeah, I'll take some questions, yeah. So thank you very much.
Okay, so we're on the fly here as entrepreneurs. They don't follow any rules. So if you've got a question, please put your hand up down the front here.
Yeah, back when this all started off, I was actually working at CSIRO, one of these research profit kind of people. And we had a guy come from NBN who admitted up front, right at the beginning, that it was a lemon, because of the funding and all that kind of stuff like that. So what your opinion on why the government pushed this so hard?
It was a soundbite. It was fibre versus copper. And it was the easiest way. I was called a Luddite. I mean, there was probably maybe a dozen of us in the industry who said, this is how it's going to finish. We portrayed how it was going to finish. Actually, by now, I thought Telstra would have owned it by now. But it's gone exactly the way we thought it would have gone, to be honest, as an end outcome anyway. So, when a politician's offers something for free or for cheap to someone, like instead of spending $6,000 to dig up your driveway, we'll do it for you and only charge you like, $60, $100 a month. That's pretty compelling, right? That was the equation that was made with the Australia, or the bet, or the promise made to the Australian people. And we were too lazy, too hopeless. I think we had very, very poor press coverage in order to see through it. It's a complex area. Like I actually published an article on my LinkedIn page. It's called "If Innovation Really Counts," and no newspaper would publish it. It's 1,800 words. It's too long. But and that's the smallest I could get it. It's a technical topic, and if you don't understand it, please attempt to understand it. But for God's sake, if you don't have a clue, stay the hell out of the debate. G'day, George. Thanks for that. Look, I think, unfortunately, it's done now. And I get asked to do a lot more talks on this, and I throw my arms up and I say, look, we've lost this. We've actually lost. So we can't undo this. This egg is scrambled, so we have to make the most of it. And I'm a libertarian. I don't want to write off $49 billion. But the reality is, we've borrowed, unfortunately, we haven't raised it. We've actually borrowed it. We're paying interest on it. We've spent it. Well, not all of it yet. I think there's some yet to go. And it's there. It's sitting in all these horrible federal budgets we have, the deficits. I'm pretty sure it's only the interest payments that sit on that. The actual capital sits over there. So literally, we haven't actually seen the negative effect on this mentioned in the press. So we've just got to write it off, George. To what degree and to how much debt versus equity you write off? I think there's a discussion there. But if the NBN, so if I was head of NBN, I'd pull my CFO in and say, right, so you're probably a CPA or a CA or something. You most likely have some sort of professional qualification. Do you know what an impairment test is? So an impairment test is when you take the value of an asset and you understand what revenue or what profit, you can squeeze out of that. And if you can't squeeze the right level of revenue out of it, you decrease its costs or you write it down until that number becomes correct. So I just want to see an impairment test done on the NBN. Oh, look, I'm hoping I can bring the fire extinguisher to the dumpster to get rid of it, but it's not going to happen. They were Muppets. Literally, it was Kermit, Miss Piggy, and Gonzo. The whole lot were there. So, look, and I'll just say that I don't quite know how to answer that because I said I am tired. I'm literally mentally exhausted on this because I just can't believe we've done it to ourselves. But governments should not pick winners. And this is what we're getting now. We see this in the energy debate too, right? Governments are trying to pick a winner in the energy debate. We've proved we're universally bad at it, time after time. We saw it with, and I actually have a lot of respect for what Malcolm Turnbull did with the NISA program. I thought it was off in the right direction. Far too many cookies were given to universities, but aside from that, it was pretty good. But he picked quantum computing, synchrotron, square kilometre array, and a whole bunch of other tech-cute projects. The only winners we should pick are highly enthusiastic, young, well-educated people. Take the shackles off business and let them create stuff. Who cares if we cure brain cancer or create Pokemon Go? It should be about, I prefer brain cancer, but I'll take the 1,200 well-paid jobs, a company worth $4 billion to create a Pokemon Go. I mean, we have to get over our version that some technology and some jobs are worse than others. Jobs are jobs are jobs. There's no greater dignity than a job. And we need to get over that. We need to stop picking bloody winners. We need to make business easy and get out of the way because no entrepreneur would have done this. I'm sorry about that.
Steve Baxter. I mean, it's hard not to listen to Steve and recall the words of Ronald Reagan. Government isn't the solution to your problems. Government is the problem.